Hello, Gerald Duran and Scott Fairchild here with you today at CanaGlobal. Today we're going to talk about, there's six things that we want to cover today, Scott. And, we're talking about our entrepreneur bootcamp and we're talking about the boomers. And so the first thing is the boomers right now are rocking the startup world. They're doing really well. We're going to talk about that. Also going to talk about what's driving the rise. Why are the boomers all of a sudden starting businesses? What's going on in their life? And how has this entrepreneurial path become the answer to accomplishing their goals in life? What's going on in the startup accelerator world? And then what's going on with CanaGlobal? And so we're going to cover those six things. And so, the first thing is when people are thinking of a startup, I think most people are thinking of the 20-something tech genius with the hoodie. But what is going on right now?
Well, I think it's pretty exciting because I think the same thing. I think it's the tech, it's the hoodie, it's the 20-something.
Right.
But what we're reading about is that it's the guys and gals like you and I with a little bit of gray here, a little bit of gray here, and we're the ones that are rocking the startup world right now. Yeah. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Boomers are actually twice as likely as millennials to launch a startup right now. And the millennials are very entrepreneurial as well, and they make up a good portion of the people that are coming to Cana, but a little bit for different reasons. And I have some stats that I want to read on the millennials. We're going to pick on them just slightly. Okay. One thing to keep in mind with the millennials is if you're from 18 to 38, and that's a wide range. And so, when you're in your 20s, you're experimenting, you're just figuring out stuff. When I was in my 20s, I started my first company at 23, totally young, totally dumb. And so that's a lot different than somebody who's probably in their mid-30s. But absolutely. Here's some interesting tidbits. 50% of millennials have high expectations of becoming millionaires. So what does that tell you?
They're really optimistic.
Yeah.
Optimistic group. They really believe in the best. They believe in the best in themselves. I think they can really do it.
So here's another one. 1 in 5 still rely on their parents for financial support.
Very understandable when you think about it. It's like, especially here, we live in Southern California and how expensive it is here. It's like, of course they're still living with mom and dad.
There's a little bit of failure to launch.
Yeah, it reminds you of that movie, huh?
Now watch this. The millennials expect to retire at 56, though they won't start saving for retirement till age 36. So
there's that optimism.
There's optimism, but what that tells me is some of them haven't done the math yet, and that's not going to work.
No.
60% of millennials consider themselves entrepreneurs, with 90% recognizing entrepreneurship as a mentality. And this is something that you've talked about a lot. They fail to understand the distinction between an idea and what?
Well, and the fact that you've got to be able to monetize it. Yeah. My daughter works for a company, and she'll have friends come in all the time and say, "Hey, I'm starting this new business," and they fail to realize you got to have somebody that really wants to buy your product. So they're constantly trying with these products, but they really don't know that enthusiasm is great, but it only carries you so far. You got to figure out how to get revenue from it.
So ideas and innovation without monetization
is failure.
And it's interesting because right now 50% of the millennials are freelancers. So it's a very entrepreneurial group, and they're highly skilled. And the reason why the millennials come to Cana is because they're looking to build this customer acquisition system. So a lot of them are really struggling, and they haven't figured out how to bring in more customers, thus revenue. So that's what's going on with the millennials. Let's talk about the boomers and what's going on with them. I just wrote an article on boomer entrepreneurial statistics, and I have a couple of bullet points that I thought were just amazing. The first one is that 67% of boomer startups are profitable.
And that's pretty incredible, isn't it? When you look at that, especially because when you hear about 9 out of 10 businesses fail, and yet look how successful the boomers are.
And it's interesting, 9 out of 10 businesses fail. We say it's uneducated enthusiasm. So they're excited, but they lack the know-how to produce revenue. Mm-hmm. And if you run out of revenue and cash, you go out of business. 76% rate their happiness at an 8+. Considering that 70% of Americans hate their jobs.
Right.
That's an amazing thing. So something's happening here where the boomers are choosing to start their own companies, and they're making their companies fit into their life, and they're happy. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 8+, that's pretty good. I don't know if you knew this or not, but boomers make up half of American business owners. When I saw that, I knew there was a lot of them out there. I didn't know that they were half, and they're outpacing startups. They're outpacing all other groups and startups. That's an amazing thing. Here's something else. Most boomers bootstrap their startups. So when we hear from millennials are looking for VC. They're looking for somebody to pump money into their idea. The boomers, on the other hand, have experience. The majority go into business services, so they're capitalizing or leveraging all these years of success that they've had as a business professional, and they're just taking that to the marketplace. So these are some amazing statistics. You know, anybody who's thinking about doing a startup, and I think when you're a boomer, it's easy to think, well, I don't know, maybe I'm too old, maybe my time's over. Absolutely not true.
Not at all.
So Scott, let's talk about what's driving the rise in boomer startups. The first thing is the gig economy. Mm-hmm. And the gig economy is fueled by 56 million freelancers. It's a $1.4 trillion economy. And the studies show that by 2020, if the trends continue, 43% of the workforce are going to be freelancers. And companies have fallen in love with this idea of not hiring the full-time person and hiring more part-time and more contract or freelancer. So what's happened is there's less wonderful full-time jobs available.
Right, that's what we're seeing, isn't it?
Yeah, and 50% of millennials right now are freelancers. So this is a huge trend that has affected why people would go into creating a startup.
Right.
But talk a little bit about aging out at 40. Because I think for a lot of people, that's like 40? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Yeah, and I know with boomers, that's a real scare for them. You know, we read a stat the other day, 43% of people over 40 worry about losing their jobs, worry about being aged out because there's going to be somebody younger and cheaper that's going to come along. And even more alarming than that, 18% of them worry about it all the time.
Here's something interesting with that. That study's from Indeed. And what it was referring to is people in tech. So
incredible.
I mean, so here are people in the most in-demand area at 40 years old. I mean,
you're already washed up, or you think you're washed up.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So that is, and what's happened, you know, how has it come to this? Well, it's come to this because of cultural generational bias. And so there's a little bit of the, you know, each generation picking on the other generation, and, you know,
we can do it better.
We can, right. And so this is, you know, if you get laid off and all of a sudden you're looking for a job, and let's say you're in your 50s, and it's a lot of times they might hire the person that is the person just like you, but a younger version that's a lot cheaper. And so that's one of the things. The other thing is, I think the path to the dream job and the dream income has changed. Everybody's looking for the dream job and the dream income, and it's totally different for everybody, but the path to that has changed. I mean, it used to be that you'd go put in your time with the company, and maybe you'd go through 3 or 4 different jobs, and that's how you had dream job, dream income. But that whole path has changed, and now the entrepreneurial path is the path to the dream job and the dream income for a lot of people. What's the big deal with the rise of purpose all of a sudden? What's going on with that?
Well, you see that, and I've heard that. I've got kids in the millennial age range, and they're talking all the time about purpose. Like, what's my purpose? I want to have a greater purpose, and it's been really good, I think, for the whole, for everybody in the workforce, because it's challenged even us in our age. To
Absolutely.
say, yeah, we want to have purpose too, and we're finding people in their 50s and 60s, and they're saying, either they realize they didn't have purpose in what they did, or they're saying, look, I'm towards the end of my life. I want to make sure that I do something with some kind of purpose.
They want to do something that matters.
Exactly. And so you're seeing that all across the board, from millennials all the way up to people in their 70s. Am I doing something that matters? Am I doing something that counts, that makes a difference?
Right. So they're kind of taking their work life and making it fit into their life.
Yeah.
So that's something new, because when you and I were coming up, our parents said, look, you go, it doesn't matter if you like your job or not.
No,
you go feed your family,
Yep.
you'll go work. And so that's totally changed. And I think that's changed for the better. This all folds into the American dream. Mm-hmm. And so I think most people are looking for the American dream. And that consists of, hey, I want to have my own home. Mm-hmm. I'd love for my home to be paid for. It's a place where I do life with my family and friends. I want to be debt-free. I want to have wonderful work-life balance. And one day I want to be able to retire. Well, think about this. One of the reasons that I think, if we look at 3 reasons of what we see in boomer entrepreneurs that are coming to us, it's the aging out at 40. Mm-hmm. That's a big one.
Right.
It's the having exceptional purpose. That's another one. But talk for a moment on what's going on with retirement, because this is a driving factor that we hear over and over.
We're seeing that a lot with people that are coming in, and they're saying, I'm recognizing that what I've got in the bank, or what I've got in my 401k, or what I've got, whatever the retirement is, it's not enough. And you've even mentioned, it's like you're looking at $1 million plus just to be able to retire, that you need set aside. And people aren't doing that anymore. They're coming in with $300,000-$400,000 or even less.
Well, and here's the deal. If they've got, let's say, 10 years left that they're going to work,
right,
and they're, 600,000 short, they're not going to get that in a paycheck. The only way that they're going to get that is to create something entrepreneurial, right, where they can make that kind of money over the next 10 years or so. Mm-hmm. And so what we're seeing is just this path to the dream job, dream income has radically changed. So Scott, let's talk about the entrepreneurial accelerators. There's really 2 kinds that are out there. There's the accelerator that's focused on venture-backed, and so these are accelerators where they're going to choose, probably out of thousands, a couple of companies that they're going to invest into, and then those companies are really getting trained of how to raise capital and how to approach future investors, because they're going to go through round after round after round of funding. At CanaGlobal, we're really focused on the bootstrapped entrepreneur. And when we look at the boomers, the majority of them will bootstrap their companies. They have these backgrounds in business that they can take straight to the marketplace. They can leverage their 20 or 30 years of professional background and leverage that into some type of services or products that they're taking to the marketplace. And they're expecting to produce revenue and profitability in the earliest days. That's really what we're focused at Cana. But the reason why that's such a big deal for us is because there's such a high percentage of companies that fail. Talk about that.
Well, we've looked at different stats, and of course, the one stat I saw was the one that 82% of businesses fail because of cash flow issues. And it's like what we mentioned earlier. It's like, it doesn't matter how great your idea is. If you can't figure out how to monetize it, you're dead in the water. Yeah.
It's really about building a customer acquisition system that produces more customers. And there's, in our curriculum, there's 8 big building blocks that all lead up to that. Mm-hmm. It's really about the know-how. You either know how to do that or you don't know how to do that. And it's like, you think about professional athletes. Why do they have to have coaches? I mean, think about this. You have the best of the best.
Right.
They all have coaches. it's really true in the entrepreneurial world, having mentors. And so really what we're doing at our accelerators, we're taking somebody who has a marketable skill set that they want to take into the market, but then we're teaching them and we're giving them with the know-how of how to monetize that. And this is how to build the ultimate customer acquisition system. So it really starts out with having the right idea. Now we were talking about this earlier, and you were saying that, do you remember the percentage of companies that don't even have good ideas and they start their companies and they don't know they're bad ideas?
Oh, it's almost 50% of them fail just because of that. They have a product that nobody wants.
So it's interesting because one of the first stages we make people define, we call it life plan, what they want personally for themselves and their family out of this company. And we do that so that the company becomes a slave to them and they're not a slave to the company.
See, and that's a really good point, Gerald. That's one of the things that you've taught me. And I thought that's a great way to look at things, because so many people, they become slaves to their business.
And what they think is, you know what, I'm gonna work very hard, I'm gonna work 80-hour weeks, and sometime in the future, everything's gonna get better. Well, I'm 33 years into startups, and what I realize is that it doesn't happen. It doesn't just happen by working hard. So it's really a strategy, and it's really understanding what I want out of my life, what I want for my family, and then designing a business around that. So that's what we call life plan. But the second thing, back to the idea, is we have a phase called ideation. And what's interesting with this phase is usually the original idea that people come up with, when we vet that idea, and we really have a rigorous vetting process. And what we would rather do is vet the idea inside the accelerator, then have the marketplace vet it outside and have it fail.
Right, so it'd be actually less expensive to do it that way.
Yeah. Sometimes there's some damaged feelings.
Sure,
somebody comes in, they have this idea, but they really didn't go through the math to see if it had financial legs. But something interesting happens when you take that idea through ideation, and there's twists and there's turns, and something innovative happens. And what we found is it's rarely the original idea that we go with.
Sure.
And so there's this process that we're focused on in the entrepreneurial accelerator, and it's all geared towards building a customer acquisition system that will provide an endless supply of revenue and new customers to grow somebody's business. Now let's tie in the faith element.
Okay.
Why, when we say we're faith-based, why is that important?
It's faith-based because one of the things that we talk about is that we really believe that every person has been created by the Creator for a purpose.
So they have a purpose.
They have a purpose. And there's something that's a God-given dream that's inside of you that you've had maybe been churning, and maybe now we're looking at the boomers and they're realizing it's now or never. I got to go for it.
There's something, as an entrepreneur, the Bible used to be a book of rules. Something changed along the way when I realized that there was 6,000 plus promises in the Bible. And there's a lot of them for entrepreneurs. And, when we're thinking about people in the Bible, who are some of the entrepreneurs that come to mind to you?
Well, let's see. Jesus had at least 6 guys that were entrepreneurs. 6 out of the 12 disciples were entrepreneurs. Peter, Andrew, James, and John were all fishermen. They all owned their own fishing business.
How about Abraham?
You go clear back to the Old Testament, you realize that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were all entrepreneurs.
The amazing thing is they took their faith and they took their workplace skill, and they were woven together. They weren't two separate worlds. And we believe that's if you're going to start a company, there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of ups and downs. But in those 6,000 promises in the Bible, there's a promise for every single kind of problem that we can run into, including when the landscape changes and we have to refresh our marketing strategies or our business development strategies, and our ideas aren't working and we lack the wisdom. What does the word say about who can we go to for that wisdom?
Well, it's pretty clear that who that we go to is the Lord. I mean, the Proverbs talks about it. It's like I read through Proverbs every single day. And it's like, and I've told people over and over again, you want to find the best book you could ever read on business, it's in Proverbs.
So right now, if you're a boomer and you're thinking about launching a company, the time couldn't be better. They're rocking it. At Cana, we're prepared to take somebody with their idea, vet their idea, take them from idea all the way to landing their first customer and launching in about anywhere from about 8 weeks to 12 weeks. One of the interesting things that we've done is sometime back, after our third round of entrepreneurs that we had come through here, we used to have hard start dates and hard finish dates. And so it was 8 weeks and everybody launched at 8 weeks. But not everybody was at the same place. It was kind of a classroom mentality. And what we changed is we changed more into a consulting mentality here, where we have people going through our 8 stages of launching a company. But if you're going through and you're not up with, maybe you're a little slower in digital marketing than the next person, and instead of launching in 8 weeks, it takes you 12 weeks, you don't have to keep up with the rest of the people in your boot camp. And this has dramatically changed how we launch, and I think the success, because no one wants to launch when they're not ready. And so that's one of the interesting things that we've done is there's 8 stages that we take everybody through. You don't have to go to the next stage until you're absolutely ready. And so theoretically, if somebody wanted to take 6 months, they could, and it wouldn't be a problem for them. And so that's one of the amazing things that we're doing here. We're connecting the dots between business, purpose, success, and faith. So if you're a boomer, now's your time.